Hello and welcome into Double A Baseball here on Monday, September 29th, one day away from the 2025 postseason getting underway. Alex, this should be a really fun one.
Yeah, I mean it's finally that time. It's extremely exciting, and I mean I think the way things have set up this year make things a bit more interesting because I think we've got a bit more parity in the playoffs than I think we've had it at times in years past, where it's been like, yes, we've got this super team, that super team, or just two or three teams in each league that you're thinking, yeah, they are far and away better than say the wild card teams that are there. But this year, it really does feel like it's pretty wide open.
So let's first start by talking about the teams who just missed the playoffs, most notably the New York Mets, who were possibly the best team in baseball for the first 2 months and end up missing the playoffs after just a downward spiral that was out of control.
Yeah, I mean, as I think Gary, Keith, and Ron mentioned on their sort of season eulogy at the end of yesterday's game, it was a very slow moving collapse. And you could just kind of see it in free fall, but in slow motion. And so it was another year in which it felt like the Mets were, even though they were really good at the beginning of the year, certainly, and I think we all expected, okay, they're going to make the playoffs. They're good enough to do that in that East, especially with how bad the Braves were when we thought they were going to be one of the top teams in the NL. But it just felt like this was once again not necessarily a complete team. I mean, last year, I don't want to necessarily say they got lucky because, again, they had a good playoff run as well, but it was a team that I think was a bit fortunate in certain areas, and I think they didn't necessarily address as much outside of the big Juan Soto splash as they probably could have to really make a complete ball club, especially given how much money they've spent. And so I think this year is going to really give them another off season in which they really have to look inwards and kind of think, is our current philosophy on building this team the right one? You've got so much money invested in Soto, Lindor. Pete Alonso just opted out yesterday, right after the game. There's a lot of questions about what this team can do to actually become a complete team in the next several months before the 2026 season.
It was so interesting because, sometimes their hitting would look great and then their pitching wouldn't. And sometimes it was vice versa. At the end of the day, it came down to starting pitching, you feel like. And it was a lot of young guys they were just trying to bring up to save their season. And at that point, you're stuck in a really tough spot. And then the bullpen moves didn't work out as well as they thought. Gregory Soto, Ryan Helsley were both not great with the Mets. But I think it goes back to the lineup. And outside of the top three, I know Lindor had a cold stretch during the year where he was like ice cold for quite a bit of time, but you don't have a ton of bats at the bottom of your lineup. Mark Vientos can get really hot at points. Is really not a great glove. So you having to play him in the field a little bit. And then Jeff McNeil, Francisco Alvarez, who was in AAA for a bit of this season. You don't have a ton of dangerous bats. And even though Juan Soto is putting up a great season, so is Pete Alonso. Two players can't carry you to the playoffs.
Well, and I think to your point, this was a team that felt like they needed Vientos, Alvarez, and then Brett Beatty as well would probably be the third
Yeah.
to take a step forward. Vientos, we saw some of the playoff heroics. We saw him really have a good late stretch last year, but they were trying to figure out if these three guys can really put up that full season to lengthen the lineup out, and they just didn't get it this year. But again, I think it does go back to the pitching because the offense during this collapse wasn't terrible on a whole. Certainly, there were times where
Yeah.
it wasn't great, but I mean, David Peterson was looking like a top of the rotation arm, had an ERA over 7 in the final 2 months. Sean Manaea didn't look very much better. Jonah Tong was one of those young guys that just didn't pan out. And again, Nolan McLean, if they made the
McLean was
playoffs, is
good.
probably starting game one. And
Yeah.
that kind of tells you where you're at when, you've got a rookie who didn't get called up until August.
I'll
Uh,
toss in another name. Kodai Senga was supposed to be, I would say, their best pitcher
right.
and was injured. And then when he came back, he wasn't good.
And it just feels like the pitching felt like it was going to be thin all year long. Peterson was a pleasant surprise, and Senga's
Right.
coming off of injury. You didn't really know, where he was going to be at. I mean, I don't think we came into this season thinking, Sean Manaea is going to move the needle, or I don't think we expected McLean to be as good as this, and the fact that he was really their lone bright spark down the stretch has you kind of concerned about where this team is for next year. Yes, they got young arms, but I mean, I don't really love the way this team was constructed overall, and there's other teams I don't really love that did make the playoffs, but still, it's like, I mean, when you spend as much money as they did, you'd expect a more complete ball club.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, when you're
Simply.
spending into 300, 400 millions, I mean, the team should be able to make at least the playoffs, and they did not. I'm sure we'll talk about the Mets more in the offseason, but we have a stacked episode to get to you. So let's mention the AL team who missed out on the wild card, who was the closest, and that was the Houston Astros. I mean, it came down to Yordan Alvarez, who missed most of the year, and then came back, and then rolled his ankle coming across home plate, and then that was pretty much their season.
Yeah, and I mean, again, this was a team that you had Hunter Brown, who was had a really good year. You have some of those guys. I mean, Alvarez will be here for a time. Brown will be here for a time. There are some really good pieces, but again, it really has felt like the Astros have waned since even 2022. But certainly, since those glory years, I guess you could say. So yeah, it just feels like the organization is, they're not having to rebuild, but this is a team that has to kind of you realize that yes, we now are pretty completely divorced from this era in which they won championships and have to figure out how they need to set up to win the next.
And a lot of it came down to injuries.
Oh yeah.
Isaac Paredes was hurt. Um, Christian Walker ends up not being very good at all. Cam Smith, who started off on fire the first month, you knew he wasn't going to keep that pace off, but him falling off to not even being an everyday player is tough for the Astros when the bottom of their lineup looked really bad at times. You do get Carlos Correa back, but you only have him since the trade deadline. You just think about it. Losing a bat like George Springer and losing a bat like Alex Bregman. I mean, that's a lot when you're talking about the Astros teams who went far. I mean, those are two of your big bats that you're just not going to be able to replace. I like Christian Walker as a hitter, but I mean, if he's not going to hit a home runs at Minute Maid, he's not going to be that useful of a player because that's his main thing is pulling the ball for homers. And the Astros have, the shortest distance from home to left field in the league.
Yeah, I mean, and it's back-to-back years because remember Jose Abreu was supposed to be the guy they brought in, and
But
then
I
that didn't
wasn't as
work
high
out.
on
And
Jose Abreu as people were
fair,
on. Christian Walker had like what 6 WAR last year.
yeah, he had like a 34 homer year again. So I'm curious whether or not that was
That
that there's something else going on with him, whether he was hurt for a part of the year or
sorry,
whatnot. But
2.6. Wow, he had 3.7 the year before and 5 the year before that.
yeah, and he has that good defensive value, but I mean, again, his big thing was he was hitting 30 homers a year. And obviously you don't do that in Minute Maid. As you said, it's, not going to really work out very well.
Yeah, and I'll mention their pitching as well. Hunter Brown was good. Kind of tailed off near the end of this year. Was probably still easily a top 5 to 10 pitcher in the AL. But Framber Valdez wasn't as good. And then you're just trying to throw things together with the back of your rotation. Christian Javier, who was out most of the year, Lance McCullers was out most of the year. The bullpen was destroyed. Hader, I don't even think he came back for the end of the regular season. He's been out a very long time. It feels like Spencer Getty had an injury as well. I mean, they were just ravaged by injuries. And at this point, if you're an Astros fan, I mean, you're not as disappointed as the Mets because first of all, you had a plethora of injuries, and Yordan Alvarez is hurt, and you've won in the past. That's the difference. The Mets haven't, won anything really.
And you also, yeah, as you mentioned, you've got the promise a bit more of a more whole ball club. I mean, again, if you're the Mets, yeah, you got Juan Soto. Yeah, you got Lindor into next year. I mean, Nolan McLean, if he becomes this guy for a full season, yeah.
Good. Yep.
But the knowledge that you have a really solid pitching staff when healthy, and their hope will be that they are next year. Again, you still have Yordan Alvarez, but I think still the pieces, 1 through 9 in the lineup, 1 through 5 in the rotation. As an Astros fan, you'll feel a bit better
Yeah.
knowing that
No
this
doubt,
is a
no
team
doubt.
that is postseason quality. The injuries just made it next to impossible for them to sustain a full season.
Definitely agree with that. Let's move on to our wild card previews. And after we do the wild card previews, we're just going to give our quick predictions and who we think is going to win the wild card, the DS, the CS, and the World Series. But first, let's start about actually discussing baseball before we toss out predictions. Start with the first game tomorrow. No way, it's Tigers Guardians, the first game on a playoff day. I am
Really,
absolutely shocked.
what a thriller. I, I think I'll just start by tossing out the one thing that I think we've both been thinking about when you think of these two teams. They can't hit. Um, Now we knew that about Cleveland. We knew that about Cleveland. I mean, you and I have talked about Cleveland first round playoff series for what, 3 years now, and
We
every single
talk
time
about
we're
it
like,
like in the middle of the regular season. Like, yeah, they're
yeah,
going to make the playoffs and then losing the wild card because they can't hit.
exactly. They just don't. It is Jose Ramirez, and then just pick a name out of a hat, and that's about it. I mean, this is a team that I think is not as well off pitching wise as they have been in their recent playoff runs for one. And again, you toss in the fact that they've only had two above average players offensively at all this year. And that's J Ram and Kyle Manzardo, who's been their DH. They're the only two with a WRC plus over 100.
Yeah,
And
Quan's not
it's
had.
hard to win games.
Yeah, Quan has not had a good year.
No.
But you mentioned the pitching. I mean, Gavin Williams has been terrific, and he's gonna be the one starting game one. Tanner Bybee has been great, but I mean, the Guardians pitching staff as a whole has not given up like any runs. I mean, you got to give credit where it's due. The Guardians, we both thought they were completely out. I'm sure you could
Oh,
find
yeah.
clips on our past shows that no, there's no way they get into the playoffs. You got to give credit. Their pitching, their ability to generate runs in the regular season with, bunting, making the defense make plays. But when it gets down to the playoffs, there is not a playoff team I don't think I've ever seen since as long as I've been alive that I am not confident at all the score runs and this Guardians team in 2025. And that's not saying I don't respect them, but outside of Jose Ramirez, there's not really a player, maybe Big Christmas, who actually scares you, strikes fear in your heart.
Right. I mean, at the same time, though, I kind of look at him the same way I looked at like Franmil Reyes, where it was like, yeah, he'll probably run into a homer in a playoff series. Don't get me wrong, he will.
And
But
breaking ball.
I mean, he probably will only have two hits in the whole series. One of them will be that homer.
Yeah, but
Again, he didn't.
for the Guardians, that means a lot. In this
Fair point.
series.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
you are talking about the team with the second worst OPS in all of baseball. I mean, the only
Crazy.
team with a worst OPS is the Pittsburgh Pirates, a team that notably was nowhere near close to making the playoffs. And
They,
so,
they were eliminated on opening day.
uh, well, if they won those Paul Skeens starts, we'll see. Who knows what would have happened. But
That's right.
But I think we've seen a lot of people think, oh, well, this team just plays scrappy, good old-fashioned baseball. And I mean, we've already dispelled the Luis Ariz phenomenon multiple times on this show, and I think we can just say that this is essentially uh, you know, the team version of that, where no, they're not going to do enough to become that good. And again, the pitching, I like the pitching. I just don't like it enough to compensate for that. I mean, we saw that Rays series a couple years ago where they were able to grind that out, and neither team could hit, but the pitching made a difference. But I don't think Cleveland has that same kind of pitching that they had in those seasons.
And then flipping it over to Detroit, Skubal is obviously going to be their game one starter. It's going to be the AL Cy Young winner back to back years. The lineup, once again, you're not sure about. You're going to need some of these bats to step up. I think Riley Green's one you looked at, started off the season red hot, is going to need a turn up in the playoffs. Kerry Carpenter. Parker Meadows has been very good this year. Um, and then, maybe Javier Baez brings some magic back. But this is a team that has the ability to score runs, but you also don't really expect it out of them.
And I think part of that is just the second half stretch. they've had plenty of issues to
A
collapse
lot.
in a very, Mets fashion, but with enough of a cushion to survive. But Riley Green, a sub 700 OPS since the start of August. You look at the second half. I mean, Zach McKinstry was an all-star for heaven's sake, and he has not been good. Javier Baez has a 529 OPS and has. Do you want to know how many walks he has in the second half? I'll give you a guess, unless you
One.
looked at
One.
my notes.
I'd go one.
What? Correct.
Just,
One walk in the
I mean,
second half.
makes
He had
sense.
10 all year long. So you're talking about the fact that the star in Riley Green hasn't performed in the second half, and a lot of the guys around him have not done enough. And again, I like the top of their rotation. Skubal, obviously, Cy Young had a complete game shutout against Cleveland earlier in the year. Casey Mize looks like a good two-starter in the playoffs. But offensively, once again, kind of like last year, except a bit more disappointing because I think we saw more this year in the regular season than we did last year.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, you can't ignore the last 2 months of the season. Usually, how you play going into the playoffs has a big effect on how good you are right now. But at this point, I mean, they do have the best starting pitcher, so they pretty much need to win game one if they want a shot. Let's move on to the biggest series, maybe in wild card history, and that's the Red Sox against the Yankees. These teams were destined to match up for probably a month to a month and a half once the Blue Jays ran away with the division and the Red Sox were just vying for a wild card spot. And this could be an all-time classic.
Definitely. I mean, just think about all the regular season games this year that we've seen between these two. I mean, the Red Sox have had the season series 9-4. They've won 6 of 8 in New York. But at the same time, I mean, it always has been intriguing beyond the whole media narrative of we want the playoff series or we want this, Yankees Red Sox series in general. It has actually really lived up to a lot of the hype this year. Just in terms of the fact that you've got both of these teams playing pretty good baseball for large swaths of the year at least.
This is just a really interesting matchup because the Red Sox played them well the first eight or so games in the regular season. Then the Yankees punch back. I mean, you look at one thing, Garrett Crochet versus Max Fried, game one. I mean, that's a terrific, terrific pitching matchup. But then you look at the difference in the bats, and the Yankees can hit the ball out of the ballpark, and the Red Sox, not only are they struggling to do that, but they're without Roman Anthony, who's their best hitter this year, and maybe doesn't even have a shot to come back later down the line in the postseason. No one knows at this point. So they're heavily relying on Alex Bregman. They're going to be heavily relying on Jarren Duran, which is really tough for Boston because they're going up against Rodon and Fried the first two games, and Duran is awful against lefties, so he's not even a guarantee to be in the lineup.
Yeah, and I think offensively, I like the overall three they have. Duran, Trevor Story's actually hit the
Story,
ball
yeah.
pretty well this year, and Alex Bregman. But again, you're then having to compare that to Aaron Judge, who's having another Judgian season, so to speak. Giancarlo Stanton, when he's healthy, has hit the ball well, and you still have enough firepower in that Yankee lineup to really just kind of blow teams out of the water. And then again, I think you look at the top of the rotations. I think that's where things are going to be more interesting because, especially from the Crochet and then whoever
Baer.
they choose in game two,
Yeah, it's going to be
it's going to be
Baer.
very difficult to tame that Yankee lineup at the top, at least.
Right, and I think the big thing is them playing in Yankee Stadium because if you're playing at Fenway, you got the deepest right field in the league, and then you got a monster. Now, no matter how hard Stanton hits it, if it's not high enough, it's not getting out. And that happened, I think, in 2021, a wild card game where Stanton just hit an absolute missile, but it doesn't matter because it just hit the green monster and bounced back, and it ends up being a single. I think that's where John Sterling's call
I
came
was going to
from.
say
It
it
feels
stayed
like
in
it
the
was.
ball game unless you were listening to John Sterling, in which case he hit that ball
Yeah.
across the Atlantic.
Yeah, 500 feet in the air. Yeah, but the bats like Ben Rice, especially Trent Grisham is going to benefit from hitting home runs out to right field. Uh, Jason Dominguez, I don't know how much he's going to play and have an impact. But you're looking at the bottom of the Yankees lineup, and maybe they aren't high average hitters, but someone like Austin Wells has a chance to hit it out. And you're looking at people in the Red Sox bottom of the lineup, and boy, they're going to need to string together some hits, run the bases well. I just think their margin for error is much tougher than the Yankees, considering they just can't hit the ball out of the ballpark.
And especially when you consider that the Yankee pitching staff, which when you look at the full season stats, obviously is good, but you look at their recent stretch, has had really good pockets from guys like Rodon, who's really had a different stride since, say, the beginning of August. He's got the lowest hit per nine in the league since then. Cam Schlitter has been a solid arm, and even if they just throw him out of the pen if need be, you've got another solid arm to add on to what is, again, a very patchwork bullpen, which has still done enough. I mean, Bednar since they acquired him. I don't think he was expected to be the guy that was going to be closing games down the stretch,
It's
but he
supposed
has, and
to
he's
still be
done
Devin
so fine.
Williams. Yeah. Um,
And
I think the one thing you look at is the Red Sox advantage, though, is the bullpen.
yeah,
Their back two end of the bullpen, 1-2 punch. It's better than anyone in baseball. I don't even think it's close. Garrett Whitlock has the best reliever ERA since July. Is given up 2 earned runs, and then Aroldis Chapman. We talk about him all the time, but Garrett Whitlock was someone I mentioned a couple weeks ago that when this guy's healthy, he is absolutely dynamic. Fastball, slider, changeup. And when you go from the eighth to the ninth inning, if Crochet or Bayo could give you 6 or 7, you're just looking for one more Red Sox reliever to give you an inning, and then the game will most likely be won. The Yankees do not have that luxury. You have Devin Williams, who's pitched well, but in high leverage, he has not been good this year. You have David Bednar, like you mentioned. He's going to be your ninth inning guy. Tim Hill is going to be your guy against like lefties out of the bullpen. But you really don't have a ton of arms in that Yankees bullpen where you're like, he should be really good. Luke Weaver, he pitched a ton in the postseason last year. He's going to be someone they look to go to as well.
it kind of reminds me of the Yankees bullpen from last year, where again they got to the World Series with that bullpen, but it just felt like they were not really sure what they had. They got a bit lucky that Luke Weaver turned into a
Right.
leverage arm late, but I don't think anyone was expecting that to happen. And you mentioned, I mean, Crochet's been able to go deep into games. I think the real question will come in game two, whether it's backs against the wall for the Red Sox or they're trying to avoid a game three, in which I think a game three will probably be a bit more beneficial to the Yankees playing at home with the offense they have. And I think their pitching staff is on the starting side of things
Right.
is a little bit deeper. Can you get a good outing out of either Bayo or even Lucas Giolito has had a solid
Yeah.
run down the final stretch, not quite compared to his start of the year,
Yeah.
but if you're riding the hot hand, can either of those two guys give you enough against the top of this Yankees lineup, which say what you will about, Aaron Judge in the postseason or the Yankees offense as a whole in the postseason at times, you have to really look at that and say it's a tall task.
It is. It is. I think you make a great point. Going into game three, Cam Schlitter, I think, would maybe start game three for the Yankees. I don't know if that's been announced. Lucas Giolito would definitely be the Red Sox game three star. He struggled with walks a ton, which is a big issue against this Yankees team because they don't swing a lot outside the zone. Um, but once again, if the Red Sox want to win, they want to win the first 2 games. But I mean, this should be a thriller. Certainly, I mean, the Yankees would love to have Garrett Cole as well, but that's just kind of how it works with injuries, especially pitching injuries. Because you look at their top three there: Cole, Rodon, and Freed. That is really tough. So they're gonna have to have one of those young guys step up. I think it's time to move to the NL. Let's talk Padres Cubs. Man, let's go.
Yeah. I mean, it will be at Wrigley despite some of the concerns that Cubs fans had down that final stretch where it didn't look like that may be the case. But again, the odd thing about this is with each of these series, I mean, you can kind of talk a little bit about recent head-to-heads. I mean, the Reds and the Dodgers, which we'll talk about, played in August. I mean, Yankees and the Red Sox have played played a lot as they
Right. Yeah.
should, and Cleveland and Detroit have played 6 times in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Yet the Cubs and the Padres haven't played since April. All 6 games were in April, so you can kind of toss all that out the window.
Yeah, for real. I think the first thing, I see you have this on your notes too. I brought up every time I've talked about the Padres this year. How is this a team who just cannot hit the ball out of the ballpark? It makes absolutely no sense. I mean, look at their lineup right now with Tatis, Arise, Machado, Jackson Merrill, Xander Bogaerts. I mean, they have guys who should be able to hit home runs. Ryan O'Hearn was a great addition at the trade deadline. That was someone they desperately needed. They need Jake Cronenworth to start hitting, but their bench. I mean, there's nothing you're like, oh, I'm really confident in this guy coming off the bench. Uh, I just I don't feel great about the Padres at all. And who's starting game one? Is it Nick Pivetta?
I haven't seen yet. I think it might be Nick Pivetta.
It's either
He
him
has been
or
their best arm this year, that's for sure.
it's Nick Pivetta. Yep. So I mean, Nick Pivetta is a good pitcher, but I don't know if he's a game one starter, but I mean, on the other end, if you're the Cubs, you lost Kate Horn for at least the wild card series, and you're already without Justin Steele the entire year. You're put in a really tough spot with the starting pitching staff that was very good in the first half, not so great in the second half. Besides Kate
Yeah,
Horn,
well, exactly. I mean, we've seen Shota Imanaga struggle to keep the ball in the yard. Matt Boyd has seen some regression. He's still been all right, but
yeah,
it's been a bit more off and on. And, after that, they've had Jameson Taillon, who's again had moments, Colin Ray. This is where, again, I know there have been rumblings that the Cubs could try to use an opener at some point in the series. Council has said. I also, though, still look at this and say, even with the good bullpen that the Cubs have had, they've had a phenomenal bullpen, really. But if they use an opener, or just based on whether, again, Shota can keep the ball in the yard against a team that doesn't hit homers, who knows how that will go. Again, Matt Boyd, I just don't know really whether they're going to have enough depth, especially if this goes 3 games. I don't know who starts a third game, and I just don't necessarily know how to feel about this Cubs pitching staff. A lot of it, though, will come down, I think, to the mercy of the weather, because if the wind's blowing out, this could be really rough. If it blows in, then maybe you feel a bit more comfortable with Imanaga and Boyd.
I think that's certainly important for pitchers who don't throw hard, and if they don't locate, someone like Imanaga is going to get hit. I remember there was a game against the Braves this year where he gave up, a couple home runs in the first inning. And that's where if you're not locating 92, 93, you're going to get hit hard in the MLB. The thing you look at for the Cubs lineup is they've been able to turn around a little bit. You're still not sure about Kyle Tucker near the end of the regular season. But still, you're gonna trust his pedigree and what he's been able to do over the past couple seasons. Michael Bush ended off the season with a handful of homers. Nico Horner has been the Cubs' best all-around hitter this year, and then Ian Happ, someone who the Cubs fans wanted DFA, has been pretty big. Seiya Suzuki has been able to hit more over the past couple of games, but this is a dangerous lineup. I mean, if they hit 3 or 4 home runs a game, I or two, even 2 or 3, I think this series would just lean heavily in the Cubs' favor.
And again, that's where I think it will be interesting, because if the weather allows them to, I mean, we've seen Seiya hit 5 homers in his final 4 games. They've found a little bit of something in that final series. Playing Miles Michaelis, who doesn't seem to keep the ball in the yard ever,
Nope.
um, makes that a bit easier. But still, I mean, you're talking about a Cubs team that can hit for power. The bullpen will be able to close games out if needed. I don't necessarily have confidence in their ability to necessarily get to the seventh inning with a starter. But again, I think, on the flip side for the Padres, if we're talking about the home run ball, they've got some good starters. They've got one of the best ERAs in baseball. After Pavetta, I don't know, how to feel. Dylan Cease is the guy who he's owned the Cubs, to be sure, but he walks a lot of guys and
Yeah.
can get hit hard. And so I think there is an ability for the Cubs to take advantage of a good Padres pitching staff if they can hit the ball hard and string together some extra base hits.
I think you're looking at it, if Michael King was healthy the whole year and had a pretty solid year. I mean, he was projected to be a starter for the playoffs for the Padres.
Yeah.
But on the side for the Padres, I mean, their bullpen is terrific. Jeremiah Estrada, Adrian Morejon, Mason Miller, who's just so elite, and then Robert Suarez. You feel good about those four arms. Everyone else on the Padres, you would like to avoid throwing mostly in a wild card
Yeah.
series, but those four guys you feel confident in. And I think it's time to move on to the last wild card series. We only have about 8 minutes left. So let's talk about the Reds and the Dodgers before getting to some predictions.
Yeah, well, let's start with the Reds because they were the team that came in at the expense of the Mets. And, they've got a really good rotation. Hunter Green is legit. They've got a good year out of Andrew Abbott, Nick Lodolo. I mean, we've talked about these young guys for a couple of years now, and they finally are coming into their own a little bit. I do think the one concern when you're facing, a Dodger Blue Death Star is they've got to be able to hit the ball. They've got to be able to go to Chavez Ravine and hit the ball. And I'm not quite sure I feel as confident about the Reds offense as I do about a pitching staff that I think can go toe to toe with the Dodgers in a 3 game series.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, their pitching staff is going to be really good, starting off with Hunter Green in Game One, who strikes out a lot of hitters. Andrew Abbott has been terrific, but this I think it comes down to the Dodgers bats and their bats. I mean, you have a lot more confidence in the Dodgers bats than the Reds bats. I mean, I think every baseball fan will tell you that. If you have Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy, Teoscar Hernandez, Andy Pajes, who's had a good year. Uh, Maybe you get a big hit out of Michael Conforto or Tommy Edman. It seems like the Dodgers always get a big hit out of one of those guys. Kike Hernandez, who's a postseason riser, however much that means. Usually it does mean something. But I think it comes down to the Dodgers rotation actually being viable now. You weren't sure how it was going to go with a bunch of injuries. Clayton Kershaw obviously is most likely not going to pitch.
He's not on the
But I said,
roster.
yeah, he's not on the roster. My apologies. But you still have Blake Snell. You still have Yamamoto. Blake Snell's been really good. Yamamoto's been great, even though he's had no run support the entire year. I think he might have the fewest run support by any starting pitcher. And then Ohtani, you have to pitch, and then Tyler Glass now as well. So you feel pretty confident in those four guys, but then their bullpen, I mean, they still have Tanner Scott listed as their closer on Fangraphs. He's not been good. Alex Vesia is good against lefties. Blake Trinan hasn't been as good as last year. And then the rest of your guys, I mean, they throw hard, but like I, I'm really worried about the Dodgers bullpen, and the injuries have crushed them in the bullpen.
Yeah, I definitely worry about the bullpen. I worry though about the Reds bullpen as well. So I think
That's fair.
in the end that'll be a bit of a wash. I mean, we've seen the Reds have to go to extras a couple times just because they've not necessarily been able to keep games in hand. But you look at that rotation, especially in the last 2 months. If you go since August 1st, between Emmett Sheehan, Blake Snell, Ohtani, Yamamoto, Glass, now they're five guys who have all had at least seven or more starts in that time. 309 is the highest ERA. And that was Ohtani, who again hasn't thrown in 2 years. So this is a rotation that through five guys, not just three, five players can go deep into games and give you a great outing and against a Reds team that, again, I mean, Miguel Andujar has been one of their better hitters. I mean, outside of Ellie De La Cruz, who's had an abysmal
Yeah.
second half, they don't really have a ton of star power, a ton of overall ability that makes you feel confident. I feel very similar that I do about, say, Cleveland. Just the fact that the Reds haven't had the ability to even play in the postseason like Cleveland has. And so I don't necessarily feel like very confident in their ability to score very many runs against whoever the Dodgers choose to throw in this series. And as much as we may have some concerns about the Dodgers, maybe when they reach the DS, the CS, or if they make the World Series, I think in a 3 game set with the Reds
Yeah.
being the opponent, I don't feel very worried.
Yeah, I don't think that applies in this series. Of course, we always see an upset in the wild card series. So that being said, let's make some predictions here with 4 minutes to go. We're just gonna kind of do these rapid fire. You can give a couple sentences if you want. Start with Tigers Guardians.
I mean, I'm going to go the Tigers. I don't really love either of these teams, but again, we've talked about Cleveland. I need to see them do something to have me bet on them.
Yeah, I'll go Tigers as well. Red Sox, Yankees.
It's tough. I'm gonna go with the Red Sox. I don't know why. Again, it's harder to pick between these two. I'm gonna go Boston just for fun.
I'm actually going to lean towards the Yankees. Not what I want to happen at all, but I think the home run power in playing at Yankee Stadium is going to make a difference. Red Sox really need to win game one. I'll say that. Padres Cubs, I'll go first this time for the NL ones. I'm going to go Cubs. I'm more confident in their hitting than the Padres, especially down the lineup and the contributions they're getting. The Padres don't have that so much.
I've been saying Padres in my head all week since we knew this was official. I'm gonna change too, and I'm gonna agree with you. I'm gonna go with the Cubs. I think the lack of power from that Padres lineup, and I think the Cubs can get something done offensively.
Lastly, I'll go with the Dodgers.
Dodgers.
Okay. Let's go back to the AL. So we both had Tigers, Mariners. Man, I'm not sure. You go first.
I'm gonna go the Mariners. I just love the pitching staff a lot better. Cal Raleigh will have an impact. I just think outside of after Scooble, I think a 5 game series plays a lot worse for Detroit than a 3 game set.
Yeah, you know what? I'll go the Mariners too. Um, I feel confident in their pitching staff. I think their bullpen's solid. So I'll go with Seattle. So whoever's going against the Blue Jays, I have the Yankees. You have the Red Sox. Who do you got?
I, I've I've bashed the Jays a lot. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here. I think any of these three teams could go through, to be fair. I don't
I agree.
really, I think it'll be close, but I'm going to go Jays.
I'm also going to go Jays against the Yankees. I mean, they've been good against them all regular season long. I feel more confident in their fundamentals, especially their defense, which has really let the Yankees down this year. Let's move over to the NL Brewers Cubs. I'll go first. I'm gonna go with the Cubs. The Brewers had a dominant regular season, but this feels like a Cubs team that could hit for power and that suddenly the Brewers not able to keep up with.
I said the Padres were going to go through it first, and I thought they would beat the Brewers. I think the Cubs will do it too. I think the Cubs
Ooh.
will just do enough. I don't know. I just can't buy the Brewers yet.
All right, Phillies, Dodgers. I got the Phillies. I think their hitting is terrific, and just to keep in mind, we got a minute 20 left, Alex. So,
I'm going Phillies. It'll be a fun series, but I've loved the Phillies all year.
all right, and then out of the AL, I got the Mariners against the Blue Jays. Mariners over the Blue Jays. Sorry, that's my pick.
You know what? I'm going to be different because I think we'll have a very similar National League side. I'm going to go with the Blue Jays. I think the Mariners could do it. It's a toss up. I'll go Jays.
All right, I'm going Phillies. So I have
Phillies.
all right, and then I will go Phillies in 6 games. Yep, that's who you got to.
I'm
Phillies
gonna go.
oh,
I'll go
over the
Phillies in 5.
Phillies and 5 over the Jays. I got Phillies and 6 over the Mariners. We got like no more time left. That's gonna wrap it up here on Double A Baseball. Make sure to check in within the next week. We'll have another episode out talking about the wild card and the DS series. So for my partner Alex Hynes, I'm Adam Oppenheim. We'll see you next time on Double A Baseball.